Hey, it's Sela Social Studies.
Hey guys, welcome back to Sealess Social Studies. All right, so we covered the Korean War, we covered the Red Scare. Now, what's going on with America as economically, or with a post-war America? All right, so let's go ahead and dive into this here. The economy. When these GIs started coming back from war, the government urged women and African Americans to now give up their jobs to those white soldiers who were coming back from war. The Servicemen's Readjustment Act, or the GI Bill, what we know of today, offers veterans money for school as well as loans for houses, farms, and businesses. And you'll see that that actually plays an important part of where the country goes. Inflation rises as people rush to buy the products that were limited during the war. If you remember when we covered the war, we covered the rationing. You had to ration fuel and butter and nylons and gasoline. You could only buy so many with the stamp book that you had. So people started going out there and rushing and buying all those items up again. Oh my gosh, I can get like 3 pounds of butter now. I'm getting it. More than 35% of non-farm workers belonged to unions in 1946. That means they had that collective bargaining, right, that we've covered earlier on. Now you have, like, except for just one person who was trying to make an injury on something, now you have the group, pow! So you have those unions. 35% of non-farm workers belong to unions. Labor unions become a major political problem because they're telling their people to strike for things like higher wages and such. The government work to reduce the power of labor unions. Now, so the economy, you think right now is like, it's kind of mixed. You have people who are told to give up their jobs. You have people who belong to unions. They're striking for better pay. But in reality, what happens post-World War II in America is the boom, the economic boom. Millions of Americans earned more money during this time after World War II than they ever had before. Look at that. Oh my gosh. Look at that minimum wage. It went from 30 cents to $1.25. Woo! They are rolling in the money. And that was a lot of money back then. So they earn more, so they spend more. Many more Americans are getting married. Remember those GIs coming back from war. They haven't seen their girlfriends, their wives in so long. They're coming back and they start families, right? They're happy to see each other and they start a lot of families. And this is what we call the baby boom. Over 70 million Americans are born during the baby boom. This is what you guys call today, okay, boomer, right? If you remember the okay boomer craze of all those, that's what we're talking about here when we're talking about the baby boom. All right. Many businesses are moving from the north to the south now. And it's not because it's just sunny down there. The south is like, we want industry now. We've gone so long without industry. So they're going to offer tax breaks. Nice. Well, they can't offer the nice year-round weather, but that's a benefit. But they offer these tax rates to these businesses. Come down to the south. Build your production facilities. More people in the south go to work off the farms now. So you have a lot more people in the south working in factories, and the factories making a lot more money. This is what you call the Sun Belt. A lot of those big businesses are moving south. In 1956, the Highway Act. Eisenhower passes the Highway Act to build more highways so people could travel more. They could commute easier. They can live outside that dirty, filthy, rat-infested city into an area where you'll learn about in a second. But get out of that city. Go travel. Go places. Experience the United States, right? National parks, big things. This is what pictures of the 1950s look like, right? Look, you have these great new stove now, which would cook like, I don't know, look at that. It's like a whole Thanksgiving dinner. You have the washer and dryer. What a nice gift, right, ladies? Hello, happy Valentine's Day. There's a heart on the washer and dryer. Look at the cars. You have all these cars getting sold now. People are making a lot more money. There's the baby boom right there. You have all these babies being born, right? Look at this refrigerator on the left. How awesome is that? It's a refrigerator on the bottom. It's a stove on top and a sink to wash your dishes. Holy mackerel, ladies. Isn't that the coolest thing in the world? You have McDonald's coming in. You have the water and soap saver dishwasher washing machine. That's what was going on in the 1950s. Oh my gosh. How could we sit there and spend and buy and become a materialistic society? So this economic boom after World War II leads to a rising demand for homes, affordable housing, neighborhoods, which we call suburbia. This is what we call suburbia, the suburbs. And by mid-1950s, people are constructing pre-planned suburbs all over the country. One of the biggest one is what we call Levitt towns, and you see that at the bottom right there. These were cookie cutter houses. They only had 27 models, so they hired 27 different crews, and they used the idea of mass production to build these houses so they can pump these houses out. I believe at the peak of Levitt towns, or at the peak of this building of suburbia or the suburbs, they were pumping out about 36 houses per day. Right? So you had a crew that did one thing, and then they moved to the next house and did that same thing, and went to the next house and did that same thing. So they got so good at it, it took them no time to build a house. So people are moving to the suburbs. It appeals to many people. Additional space, additional conveniences. You have, your own land, your own car. You have a picket fence, a dog, 2.3 kids. It's like the whole American dream. However, a lot of people, there are critics of this as well. There are critics of the suburbs. Many people like going to the suburbs, but there are definitely a lot of critics. And who are some of the critics? Some of the critics are saying that racial fears, racial divides are separating the whites out to the suburbs and leaving the poverty-stricken demographics left in the cities. And you actually see that because of the 1950s, you will see a high percentage of Latino and African Americans living in the cities, in the poverty-stricken cities, while the whites actually moved out to the suburbs. All right, suburb life. Here you go. Criticism. Critics believe that suburban life was too heavily based on consumer culture. That means buying all that stuff that we just went over, all those dishwashers and washing machines. It was lacking diversity. I just covered that, right? Most people living in the suburbs are white and middle class. You do not see many African Americans, Latino Americans moving out to the suburbs. It just didn't happen, which now caused a greater deal of discrimination. Communities actually refuse to sell homes to black families, and here's why. Here's what would happen, and it's crazy to think this way. If a community sold a home to a black family, many of the white people living in that community felt that it lowered their home value. So then they would sell their home for cheap, and then the next person would sell their home for cheap. And then you had so many white people saying, oh my gosh, I have to get out of here, all because a black family moved in, because their houses are losing value and losing value. And this is how you get today's demographics the way they are set. And it's an insult, it's a slap in the face, and it's absolutely horrible. But this is the type of things that happened in the 1950s. A big part of discrimination happened in the 1950s, but it also starts the civil rights, our modern civil rights movement. People would move to the suburbs. They collected fewer taxes. Cities began to decline because so many people were moving out. So that means less money was being spent on keeping the cities up. Federal government began urban renewal programs to try to improve the life in cities. Here's a great little ad here. This is, as you can see, Mercedes, but move to the suburbs. They're trying to appease, or they're trying to appeal to all those people. And this is what a Levittown looks like. Like I said, it's cookie cutter houses. You see so many of them right there. So many Levittowns around the United States where they just build. They take 4, 5, 6 models of houses and just build it over and over and over again. And you could pack so many people in such a small little place. So what's the culture going on in the United States afterwards? Well, 2 things: television and music. Those are the 2 big changes. In the 1950s, nearly 90% of Americans owned television sets in their houses. They were watching about 6 hours a day on average. They were watching news, comedies, sports shows, things that they couldn't do before, like watching the president on TV, where they could only hear him during Roosevelt. Now they can watch him on TV. Music, you have the older generation. They're listening to things like Frank Sinatra and big band swing, but hold on, hold your horses. Who is that guy right there? Elvis Presley. So now you have rock and roll sweeping the nation. Look at that. Teenage fans bought more than 70% of all records in the 1950s, and guess what they were about? Rock and roll. So you have rock and roll, you have television. That's where the rock and roll television come out of. So the 1950s, if you're white and move to the suburbs, it's great for you. Think of like the movie Grease, right? You have those white, affluent suburbia neighborhoods going out there, going to the high schools and everything like that. Meanwhile, they don't touch on the inner city or what's going on in the city. So what type of people are criticizing this new society? Women. They're told to give up their jobs. They can only work in limited fields. They want to make they want to make an impact on society. The government told them, once you get married, quit your job. You're a housewife. They didn't like that. Minorities shut down of the emerging American dream. African Americans, poverty rates amongst African Americans were double than those of whites. Segregation in school, lack of political voice, long-standing racial prejudices stifled the economic advancement of many African Americans. And you'll see, come 1954, we have a lot more governmental say in civil rights with when we start passing Brown versus Board of Education and things like that. Latino Americans languish in urban American barrios. Eisenhower actually responded with a program designed to deport millions of Mexican Americans. Native Americans, of course, always have problems in the United States government ever since day one. Eisenhower ends federal support for tribal nations. He offers incentives as relocation assistance and job placements. However, they didn't come through. They didn't follow through on any of those. So you have Native Americans, Latin Americans, you have the women, minorities, African Americans. You have these type of people criticizing the new society. Because when you look at the new society of the suburbs or suburbia, what is it? It's a white family, a dog, a white picket fence, their own home, their own car, their own driveway, 2.3 kids, living in a world of Leave It to Beaver. If you don't know what that is, look it up. That is what white suburbia is after World War II.